Blog Talk Radio.
Back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We're going to talk about the Billy Meyer case this evening, and I hope everyone has been enjoying all the clips I've been posting up there. I've posted quite a few FIGU bulletins up, and I've posted contact reports up, and I know probably by now you're all totally sick and tired of that mechanical voice, so I thought I would quit being lazy and try to do a show by myself this evening. I've been, of course, going over the Meyer material, and there's just a lot here, and there's continual learning when you're studying the Meyer material. And one thing that I continue to relearn and learn more about is who this guy is. Edward Albert Meyer, he's a farmer who lives in this tiny mountain village in Switzerland. The village is called Hinterschmidruti. It's about an hour east of Zurich. And his official mission, let's call it that, began in about 1975, and that's when that group, the FIGU, formed there at the Semjase Silver Star Center. And if you've listened at all to Contact Reports 16, 17, 18, and even 19, it talks about some of the tremendous problems they went through as the group was just starting out. There was a lot of infighting, a lot of trouble within the group. Billy himself actually had a breakdown, and at one point was in a coma. He was beamed up to the ship where Semjase and Ptah kind of nursed him back to health. Billy's nerves were frayed. They were completely shot. At one point, him and the extraterrestrial Quetzal had serious words. It was a real mess. There was all kinds of troubles within the group. The gossip and infighting was terrible. And then to kind of top all this craziness off, there was an attempt on Billy's life. these men in black, they took and they wrapped they did something to Billy's car where his gas pedal froze open and it caused a wreck. His wife was trying to drive for the first time, and this all ended in a wreck. So Billy has been through a lot, and the group there in Switzerland, they've been through a lot, and they've had their growing pains, and the High Council even told the Plejaren that they probably should break off the contacts with Earth humans because there's not a whole lot of hope for these Earth humans. At least it didn't look like it. The Plejaren kind of pleaded with High Council, and they were allowed to continue. So, for those of you who are new to the show, you don't know what I'm talking about. You don't know who these people are. For those of you who listen to this archive that are new to the show, you're probably going to not know what I'm talking about whatsoever. So, as I said in the beginning, Billy Meier, he's a one-armed farmer from Switzerland. He lives in this tiny mountain village. He's had extraterrestrial contact since about 1945, way back in near the end of World War II. He was a young boy. He was about 5 years old, and he was playing in a forest in Bulak, Switzerland, and was playing around a stream, studying some of the fish there that he saw in the stream, and then he caught a silvery flash coming out of the sky, and it was a pear-shaped craft, which I think it ended up hovering just inches above a field nearby, and out stepped this man who was about 1,000 years old, an extraterrestrial man that had telepathic contact with Billy before this physical contact occurred. So young Billy kind of recognized him, knew who he was, and Svath took him into the ship and started to mentor him, give him his first lesson, if you will. And he also used some kind of electronics to download information into his consciousness. You see, Edward Albert Meyer, his human spirit, we all have a human spirit, it's the real us. His human spirit is very, very ancient. And it goes back to what the Plejaren call times. And is a German prefix which refers to very, very ancient times. And you have to kind of study history to make any sense out of the Meyer material or to understand what is happening here on the Earth at all. Billy's spirit here on the Earth has about 6 predecessor personalities, at least, probably more. He's been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. Today, he's a one-armed farmer from Switzerland with a 5th grade education that writes books like The Psyche, which are so advanced you would think they came from somebody with 4, 5, 6 PhDs. Where did this incredibly advanced information come from? Well, it comes from several sources, one of which is extraterrestrial. And I was speaking about Svath, who is a very elderly man from a race of extraterrestrials that initially, when they were on the Earth, they even called themselves the Pleiadians. And the UFO community today refers to them as the Pleiadians, but they're not from the Pleiades. Our Pleiades has about 254 young blue suns, which burn too hot and too short to really have planets that support life. These extraterrestrials are from a different space-time configuration about 80 light years beyond our Pleiades, and it's called the Pleiades star system. And they have a world that's called Era, and Era is very Earth-like. It has a very similar ecosystem, except these extraterrestrial humans live in balance with nature. They have a small footprint on their planet. They have a small population, and they control their reproduction. And that's one of the keys to keeping things in balance on any planet, is to control your reproduction and not to overpopulate your planet. To have a balance with nature requires us to have a certain understanding about who we are and what is this universe that we live in. Well, Sloth taught Billy about something that he called the Creational Universal Consciousness. It's the superintelligence that built our universe, but not only built our universe, but built billions of other countless universes. And as it talks about in Contact Report 10, there are universes within universes. There are universes adjacent to universes. This superintelligence builds universes as a part of its own evolution. And human reincarnation plays a role in this evolution of this superintelligence. It's a spiritual being. Billy refers to it by the German word Wesenheiten, which is very interesting because the water and gases are also referred to as Wesenheiten. So you can start to understand why the term universal consciousness or creation is not what our religions call God. In fact, the Maya material says the gods of the earth were human. They came from the depths of the universe, and they unrightfully set themselves up over the earth humans, and they demanded worship, and they presented themselves as the creators of all things. And each one of these gods had their own followers and created their own religions. So the creational universal consciousness is not our religious anthropomorphic God that becomes jealous and vengeful and gets involved in human wars, particularly tribal warfare as described in the Old Testament in the book of Numbers, chapter 31, where they killed women and children and stole virgins. The universal consciousness is not that kind of being. It doesn't do that. It builds universes. It evolves also through this process of reincarnating spirits. You see, the real you is not your material body or even your material consciousness or not even your personality, because your personality is going to die when your physical body dies, and your consciousness is going to go. What's going to remain is your human spirit, which is a tiny fragment of the universal consciousness. Now, the first time you incarnated, you were very unknowing. And through each lifetime, you will retain knowledge. And in 1975, Billy started having contacts with a woman from the Pleiadian star system named Semyase, which is his most well-known contact. And she described the human spirit. She said, it doesn't die. It doesn't sleep during your deepest sleep. It'll record everything that you do. And what happens is when we physically die, this human spirit will leave the body and it will go into what's called the spiritual realm or the fine matter world, which is kind of a band of energy that exists around our planet, but it also exists in the same three-dimensional space that we're occupying now, just a different dimension. And when that spirit leaves the body, the universal consciousness will take the experiences that you had in this lifetime and put them in the storage banks. And in Guido Musburger's book, And Still They Fly, it says that they're arranged kind of like a mosaic, which I always thought was interesting, and there might be more, information there. Now, when you come back into your next lifetime, it will occur 21 days after your father's sperm fertilizes your mother's egg. And your human spirit will be put into an embryo. And that embryo, before it is animated by the human spirit, that embryo is evolving. And it's evolving based on impulse evolution. You see, all the different categories of life, they evolve with a different kind of evolution. When the human spirit comes in the embryo of that child, the consciousness animates that embryo, and then that child becomes a human being, and it starts to evolve based on consciousness evolution. Now, if something comes down from the universal consciousness, it's called the consciousness block, and what it does is in the subconscious of the child, it'll create a new subconscious for this child, and it'll put all the wisdom of its predecessor personalities in the subconscious of that child. Now, the conscious part of that human being at this point can't really access the wisdom of its predecessor personalities. So it has to go through the process of growing back up again, and the consciousness will develop, and then it will receive inspiration from its predecessor personalities, and it will receive impulses from the storage banks. And that's how people who have had more lives evolve quicker. As a child, they'll pick things up faster, and because of this interaction that's going on, there is a tremendous amount of, I don't know if I want to call it information, that comes from our subconscious. Most of our thoughts start from the subconscious mind, which is incredible if you think about how unusual that is. We have a will, we have a free will, and we have this subconscious. It's strange because much of our motivation comes from our subconscious, influencing our free will. And the whole thought process is also another fascinating thing, because human thought is powered in part by the universal consciousness, and I'll get back to that later. I don't want to drift off that. We were talking about reincarnation. So the human spirit then has to grow up when the consciousness of that child has to relearn, and it gets its impulses from the storage banks and from its subconscious predecessor personalities. And you grow back up into an adult. And I have this feeling, just kind of based on my own experience, that once you get 40 or 50 years old, I think that's when you start to really receive more impulses from these predecessor personalities. Now, some people have legitimate past life memories, but at this point in our evolution, as a stage 2 society, we generally don't remember our past lives. Now, as we evolve up the 7 evolutionary steps of human societies, we will have total recall of previous personalities, I think, when we're at stage 5, which is life and creation, and life and creational wisdom. You see, human beings here on the earth are a stage 2 society. We have rational life. We don't always act that way. But we have the ability of rational thought. And I think we're about to enter into the age of intelligence. And the Maya material refers to that as the 3rd millennium. In the 3rd millennium, there is this great transition which occurs, where we, in our material intellect, we're racing ahead very, very fast. Unfortunately, here on the earth, there's no balance. There's not a balance. Our spiritual intellect is seriously lagging. And one of Billy's contacts, Askett, talked about that as well. And Svath told Billy that the 3rd millennium started when the United States dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that Svath also told Billy to stay in the background, to focus on his writings, that people would eventually tell his story, and that eventually his teaching would lead the people of the earth into a time of prosperity, of freedom, of love. Because you see, love is the highest principle in creation. And everything follows love in absolute logic. In fact, the universal consciousness, it radiates love, kind of like a steady stream of love. Now, we have the ability to shut ourselves off from the love of creation. But, of course, that's one of the worst things you can do. Because, as Svath told Billy, he said, everything in the universe is bound together and it's connected. And the web of life is created because of the immeasurable might and the love of creation. And I think I've told this story before, as Billy, even before he had his contacts with Svath as a very, very young boy, he woke up at 3 a.m. on a warm May evening when he was living in Bulak, Switzerland, and he crawled out a lower window in his bedroom, and he sat on the bench and he looked up at this spectacular starry sky, and he saw the twinkling stars, which radiated a beautiful light, but in his spirit, which, by the way, was very ancient and had all of the wisdom of all these predecessor personalities. And he sensed the radiating love of creation. And he said, his own voice said, as a 4-year-old kid, my life exists because of the love of creation. And he talked about seeing the radiating light of the stars, but that he was aware of this invisible light. And he felt this deep sense of longing for faraway worlds because of these predecessor personalities, which as a very young boy, they were already inspiring him. The knowledge from these predecessor personalities that was locked in his subconscious when he came into this world. So we all have the ability to sense this radiating love of creation. The German word that's most used is empfinden, which talks about a fine, sensitive feeling, to be able to sense the radiating love of creation. And personally, I'd like to think the birds sing because they sense the radiating love of creation. I don't think they're as conscious of it in the sense that we can be conscious of it. But I think all of creation functions automatically because of the interconnectedness and the love of this superintelligence. And as I say often, there is this wonderful writing that Billy has created. It's called The Goblet of Truth. And it has a paragraph in there that's entitled, What the Truth Knows to Say. And it says, lakes, rivers, seas, the earth, plants, animals, bushes, trees, everything that crawls and flies on the earth is a life form with a spirit form. And these spirit forms are on a journey through time, which involve many, many lifetimes. And that death is just the passage to rebirth. Rebirth into the world of pure spirit. And many of these creatures are aware of each other, and they communicate with one another. And they're connected by psychic vibrations. And no creature attempts to set itself up above other creatures of its own kind, because all these creatures are connected. They're bound together by this indissoluble web of life, which you can see and experience by going into nature, by going into a forest. You can hear all the different species of birds as they sing. And I'd like to think part of that singing is inspiration from the universal consciousness, as they communicate with one another, and the crickets and the cicadas and the frogs and the peepers and all these different animals which are connected, many of them by these psychic vibrations. And the German word is schwingen, my best pronunciation, which is probably incorrect, which comes, in the case of the human, the electromagnetic waves, they come from the Gemut, the part of our spirit body which controls our thoughts and feelings associated with our spirit body. The material body has the psyche, which controls the thoughts and the feelings of the material body. The Gemut sends these electromagnetic waves to the psyche, to help us, to help the conscious mind, to empower the conscious mind. And the power, the incredible power of our thoughts actually streams in from the expanse of the universe. I know that sounds incredibly abstract, but I think what we'll do now is we'll take a short little break, maybe even 4 or 5 minutes, listen to a little relaxing music, and I'll try to pick back up there with the incredible power that's associated with the thinking of the human being. back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. A little bit longer break there than I really intended. I think what I'll do, of course, I'll open up the phone lines if anyone wants to call in the second half an hour and discuss anything that I talked about in the first half an hour. But I'm also going to mention some things now from the book, The Psyche, which is an excellent book, and you can order that via Michael Horn. If you Google Michael Horn, you'll find his website. I think it's called theyfly.com, and if you send him an email, he can get you a book. I picked up one when I was in Arizona this year. And it's a book that's written on a much higher level than I can even describe. Let me tell you, I've read the first 15 pages more than a dozen times. Let me read a few very short sentences, and then we'll try to talk about these a little bit. This comes from page 86. Every broader thinking human being is no longer in the need of direction by religious beliefs because his own cognition allows him to recognize good and evil. And this is something I alluded to in the first half an hour. This comes from page 87. The actual decisions and deeds of every human being are only partially based on fully conscious considerations. The greatest part stems from the area which is withdrawn from the immediate influence of the will, and that's the subconscious. Now think about that. The will, your will, does not influence your subconscious. I think it's the other way around. Your subconscious influences your will. Now this comes through, and this is on page 102. It says, only the power of thinking forms the good and the evil. The power that the thinking uses as its impetus does not stem from the human being himself or herself. It streams in the spirit, and from there in the consciousness, coming out of the unmeasurable expanses of space of the universe. It stems from the tremendous wealth of spirit of the life of creation. What that's saying is, in some way, incredible way, our thoughts are powered by the creation. This power is coming out of the unmeasurable expanses of space. And I talked about the life of the creation there. And is a German prefix that signifies the earliest, most ancient, initial, primeval time. Now, Billy, in describing himself, stated that his spirit form had already been active for millions of years in the Lyra Vega systems and had come to the earth voluntarily in human bodies, plural, in human bodies as a teacher, a herald, and a prophet. It had also returned into the material sphere from a highly spiritual level called Arahat Athrasata, and had already performed prophetic functions since times on a planet called Laysan and on other planets of the Lyra Vega systems. So this very ancient spirit has been reincarnating on other planets in the Lyra Vega systems and on the Earth since times. Now, one of the things I'm going to cover next is something that's talked about in his self-responsibility. It's part of the teaching of the Spirit. And those of you who are going to hear this that are like me, who come from a religious background, just kind of try to set that aside for a minute, because I'm going to kind of sound almost like I'm blaspheming here, but it's not really. What is self-responsibility? Being responsible for your thoughts and actions not only helps you learn towards the better and good for your current lifetime, but also your future incarnations as a new personality and a new human being. When you die, it is only your body that dies, and your personality and your consciousness. Your material body is never immortal, and it cannot be. There is no immortal God or Savior. How long you live is, on the one hand, a question of how responsible you are for the well-being and care of your body, and on the other hand, a question of natural disease and virus contracting, which cannot be helped for the time being. Now again, those of you who are religious, which I've put myself in that category as well, just try to set that aside for a second and listen to what this says. There is no God or Savior that is responsible for the well-being of your body or how long you live. Your body is your responsibility. Your personality, respectively, your consciousness gets dissolved into fine spiritual energy, which is known as the overall consciousness block. The overall consciousness block records all your past life knowledge and wisdom, which have been learned. Each time you die in a material body, the overall consciousness block absorbs your consciousness, which contains your knowledge and your wisdom from the material life that you just have. Thus, through millionfold incarnations into a human being on a planet, you continually evolve and learn. And again, I want to say, for those who are religious, and I put myself in that category, just set this religion apart for a second and listen to what this says. No God or Savior is responsible for your learning and your evolution. You as a human being are solely responsible for your consciousness and how much you learn and evolve in each incarnation. Therefore, also, there is no heaven or hell that exists in the entire universe where your spirit form is judged to live for eternity by a God or Savior. Now, boy, some people on hearing that are going to either stop the MP3 from playing, others may leave the chat. I only put the information out there. I let you decide whether you think it is right or wrong. The more I study the Maya material, the more grounded that information like that makes me feel. Now, there, of course, as we talked about in the first half an hour of the show, there's a super intelligence which runs all things, which radiates love. But you are responsible for yourself. And our thoughts have a tremendous power. And you know, our decisions and our deeds are only based on fully conscious considerations, as I was talking about before. Now, in psychology, the subconscious is the part of the conscious that is not currently in focal awareness. But there's a tremendous influence on every human being from our subconscious. Earlier, I was talking about the creation, and I was talking, also I mentioned that there are more than one universe. And this comes from Contact Report 10. There are countless billion universes like this one, and they are held in the endless spiritual intelligence of creation. Now, what we see with our eyes is only a tiny iota of what is really there. And what we can't see is immeasurable. It's inconceivable. It's unthinkable. It is confusing. And it's very confusing for the unspiritual human intelligence. Our entire universe is one of many rooms that must be counted as myriads. And let me read to you what it says here. Because there are universes within universes, universes beyond universes, universes under universes, universes above universes, and universes out of the universes within this mighty, colossal, and all creative spiritual intelligence of the creation's existence. And the human being is connected with this mighty spirit, with the elemental powers of existence, because a fragment of this spiritual intelligence of the creation dwells within us and enlivens our human spirit. I like to think of the human spirit as a tiny holographic copy of creation. And we carry within us this tiny holographic copy of the creation. And in the ancient past, sages used to say this creative spirit is nearer to the human than his own breath. And what gives me hope is because in the contact notes it says the human may not escape from this highest consciousness. So even though it looks like the third millennium is here and people are just going to go ahead and destroy the world, that we cannot escape from this highest consciousness. For sooner or later, every human surrenders to this creative reality. Because it is the life of his life. It is the spirit of his spirit, the consciousness of his consciousness. It's the central force of all life. And the human materialistic intellectual thinking sinks into absolute insignificance. Remember, Semyasi would warn Billy about materialistic intellectual thinking, and she told him that the earth humans are weighed down by this materialistic intellectual thinking, that it brings them all sorts of griefs and worries and troubles because they do not allow themselves to be influenced by the universal consciousness, by the spirit in them. In fact, most of us, when we love, we only love on the basis of emotion, which is a false form of love. And it's subject to enormous fluctuations in intensity. And it can suffer through various changes. Do you have a loved one? Do you have a friend? That suddenly this love that they have for you has been transformed into rage and hatred, and you're left thinking, wow, what did I even do? Do you know the animals, they kind of function on this love, which is called wisdom conditioned love. Not that the animals have wisdom, but because every tiny plant and every tiny animal in creation fulfills its purpose in creation. Only the human being with his consciousness can turn himself off from the radiating love of creation. And this false-based human love has enormous fluctuations. Now there's another kind of love. It's called well-conditioned, wisdom-conditioned love. And it's in a harmonious state of connectedness with all things. It's called a genuine love. And it's independent of a human being's age, appearance, and personality. And Billy explains that love is essential for all evolution in life. And he explains that true love is a conglomeration of what he calls a fine spiritual perception. Remember me earlier talking about empfinding? When you go into nature, if your spirit is tuned, you will be able to pick up on the radiating love of creation. You will hear the birds sing. You'll hear the sounds of nature as the wind goes through the trees. This is a fine spiritual perception. It's not built on emotion. True love comes from a fine spiritual perception of reality. Such a perception of reality comes from respectful, concentrated observation. Now think about that. If you respectfully concentrate and observe nature, you will start to develop this fine, fluidal perception called empfinding. And that's what true love is a connectedness to all things. So let me read again from some of Billy's writings here. So the knowledge and wisdom acquired this way, through a meditative concentration on the reality of a thing, results in the experience of love. However, the ability to exercise such concentrated observation is something we earth humans rarely possess, and therefore we must develop it through hard, ongoing practice, often over a period of many years. But if you will go through this ongoing practice over a period of many years, you will be able to have this fine spiritual perception, this empfinding, which is not built upon emotion. It is a perception of reality that comes from respectful, concentrated observation. And when you have this, the powers of your consciousness will grow. And there'll be a created knowledge and ability. And let me read what it says here. And I think this comes from the OM. It says, therewith, he really does open himself for all creational powers that stream into him out of the infinite vastness of the universe as a living current of love. And the human must feel that nature calls to his breast. Now, there is a writing. It's called the OM, and I must thank Larry Driscoll. I think he was the one that sent this to me. It's called The Book of Books. It's called Omphalen Morado. Omphalen Morado is Lyrian for the navel of life. And in Canon 14, it talks a little bit about the spirit realm. And as we're quickly running out of time here, I thought I would read a little bit from the OM. It says, on this side of the earth is the life of the coarse mattered material and the learning period and evolution connected there within. But in the space of the other side is the life of the spiritual and the evolution of the spirit form connected there within. And also the preparation of the spirit form for the reincarnation into a new human body takes place in the space of the other side. So we're prepared when we're on the other side for our next material life. And this side and the other side, meaning the material life and the spiritual life, they occupy the same space, however separated by two different dimensions. This is by the visible and palpable material plane and by the invisible and impalpable spiritual plane. Therefore, two dimensions are given: the material plane in which the physical body finds its being, and the spiritual, into which the spirit form of a man floateth after the death of the material body to live in the space of the other side. Now, for the past couple of weeks or so, I've been observing the incredible, have you ever seen the incredible ability of a weed to grow? And it'll just shoot. We have, I live here by a state park, and in one of the areas where I walk the dogs, there are weeds which have only been in existence for a few weeks, a month, 2 months, and they're taller than I am. And I'm thinking about this spirit form that has just literally shot into the material. And these things are popping up all over the place. So every tiny plant, every tiny animal in creation fulfills its purpose in creation. And take the time to study nature, and you'll understand what our life is all about. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this show. I must say that I almost feel to the listeners I should apologize for all of the clips. I've done 1 million shows but haven't said a word, and I've just played the Meyer material. It speaks for itself in some ways, but I think it's very helpful to go over it in detail. And I want to thank everyone that came to the show this evening, and I hope I see you guys again, and we'll try to do more shows where I actually say something. I hope you had a good evening, and we'll see you. Sure, I'll put a few more Meyer clips up on Blog Talk this week. Have a good week. Hang in there, and we'll talk to you next time.